Hi, and welcome to Inside 11Alive News Investigates. I'm Faith Jesse. A cutting-edge technology is finding a home in Georgia, but some ask at what cost? 11Alive News Investigates Zach Merchant taking us inside his latest investigation, which takes a closer look at data centers amid this growing concern, Zach, about the strain that it might put on some resources.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about this. We are talking about the technology that helps power our modern world, but it takes a lot of resources to get it done. Take a look.
This is beautiful, and this is what we need more of.
But Amy Sharma worries new developments put it at risk.
Water is a finite resource.
The executive director of the science advocacy group Science for Georgia says the threat sits inside massive warehouses, many hidden in plain sight, just miles from downtown Atlanta.
They are hugely resource intensive.
They're known as data centers. Emory University Goizueta Business School professor Ramnath Chalapa says the servers inside of them help power the digital age. And now the explosion of artificial intelligence is exponentially increasing demand.
They form the fundamental backbone of the entire AI-driven economy.
But all of that computing comes with a cost. One of the biggest inputs, Chalapa said, is water, used as part of many data centers' cooling systems.
A large data center might use upwards of 200 million gallons annually.
That's the equivalent of close to 2,000 homes, according to one EPA estimate. And Georgia is becoming one of the nation's leading states for data centers, according to Dan Diorio with the Data Center Coalition.
Georgia's definitely in the top 3.
State filings reviewed by 11Alive News Investigates show developers have submitted proposals for at least 25 new data center projects across Georgia just since 2024, totaling more than 5.2 billion gallons of potential water usage each year. One of the latest projects, an enormous construction site here in Newton County. Dan Diorio estimates statewide roughly 100 data centers are either already online or are in active development, putting increasing demand on Georgia's water system. Diorio argues the data centers bring thousands of jobs, and the companies behind them have a financial incentive to use water resources carefully. Are data centers safe for the environment?
Yes, I think so. So data centers are a highly efficient user of those inputs.
But in a rapidly evolving industry, Chalapa says there are still questions about its impact on currently existing infrastructure.
Because this infrastructure, this water table, and how we draw water from that was not built for this sudden surge in consumption.
This new wave is here. We're not going back to a world where generative AI does not exist.
We do need to invest in these data centers. The genie's out of the bottle. There's no way of putting it back or not going back in time.
The challenge, he says, is to ensure the growing industry strikes the right balance between development of an essential technology and stewardship of the resources required to power it.
The contrast ought not to be seen as a contrast, but ought to be seen as how do we accomplish both of those elements.
My biggest worry is that currently we're not paying attention.
For the sake of places like these, she hopes that changes. Zach Merchant, 11Alive News Investigates.
Wow, absolutely so interesting, because we use these devices every single day. How many of you all, raise your hands, know where these data centers are? Now we do, because we watched your piece. But I mean, it's so interesting, like you guys discussed. While in the past it might have not been ready, the fact is we are here, we are growing, and it's not going to stop.
No, and this was really an eye-opening story for me to report, because you're right. I mean, how many of us this is part of our daily lives, right? Professor Chalapa, who you heard from in that story, he put it really well. He said, this phone, the phone in your pocket, you can almost think of it as a really good screen. It's not doing a lot of the computing. It's presenting that computing. So when you use, an app on your phone, more likely than not, the actual computing to make what you were seeing happen, it's actually occurring at one of these data centers, and they are popping up all across our state. There are lots in Douglas County. There's that big site out in Newton County that is under construction and may be used for a potential data center or data centers there. But just in the last year or so, we've seen something like 25 new potential projects be presented according to state filings we reviewed. This is coming. It's happening. And obviously we talked about the water impact, because water is one of those key inputs of these data centers, but power is a big one too. And we talked with Professor Chalapa about that as well. This is what he said about how much electricity, how much power is needed for a lot of these data centers.
Data centers can consume between 15 to 50 times more power than, for the same space, than a typical office building.
15 to 50
15
times.
to 50 times more than what would be consumed in a typical office building in that same space.
And that's over the span of a day, a month, a year.
Yeah, so on a day-to-day comparison or month-to-month comparison, essentially you are talking about an order of magnitude at least more power consumption.
So that's a heck of a power bill, number one. And even more than that, the impact that it's having on the environment, of course.
You talk about the power bill, the natural reaction to anybody who is a ratepayer, who pays for power in Georgia is, how will this impact me? How will this impact what my home power bill is? And we want to get to some answers on this. So back in January, the Georgia Public Service Commission, they approved a new rule that they say will prevent the average home from taking on additional costs as a result of these data centers using lots of power. I want to quote here the Public Service Commission chair, the vice chair, I should say, Tim Eccles. He said at the time, and this is a quote, "We want to keep Georgia the best place to do business, but data centers will need to bear the cost of their electricity acquisition." That's what the Public Service Commission is saying. But there's also an environmental question too, right? And this is just a lot of power being used. And Professor Chalapa, he pointed out, it's all happening so quickly. We're at this kind of inflection point. And he and Amy Sharma, who we also heard from in that story, Amy Sharma said, look, it's a question of balance. And she made that point during our conversation when we were interviewing her down by the river there, which is a beautiful spot. Let's listen into a little bit of what she had to say.
Computing has done many wonderful things for society. So burn it all down is not an option, but we can be better stewards. We just have to think about the actual true cost of what's going on. And like I said at the beginning, it's not an either or, it's a yes and. So how do we do it together?
Not an either or, yes and. I mean, that's so important that she said that, because the reality is this is where we are. It's going to continue to grow. Technology is not slowing down anytime soon.
No, not at all. And you mean, how many times have we talked about artificial intelligence and generative AI, and that has just really sent this growth curve into a kind of an exponent. No kidding, right? I mean, you think about where we were when what was my own personal understanding of AI even a year or two ago, and then compared to now, and I think, how much more is it going to be a part of our daily life in a year or two beyond that?
Absolutely.
Professor Chalapa also made the point, he said, look, these and the data center coalition too, they also made this point, these centers, they create jobs. There are questions about how many jobs are directly created versus indirectly created. That's a question for economists. But it takes construction workers and others to build these facilities. Professor Chalapa also said there are some benefits in having these data centers in the United States because our privacy laws, our data protection laws apply because our data's got to be stored somewhere. So there are some potentially national security implications, and it helps to have these things domestically. But he, just like Amy Sharma, got to this point of it's a balancing act, and this is what he said about that.
We're talking huge numbers because we're just at the beginning part of the growth. As AI, generative AI, and the amount of data. So we always talk about how much data is being generated each day through emails, this and that. Those are all human done things. But if machines themselves are creating data, the ChatGPT script, when you asked it a question, didn't exist before. It was created then for you, right? So where is that data going to be stored? Or are we going to discard it every time, right? Which we are not. I don't think we discard anything anymore. It's all going to remain in some fashion. So I guess the question then becomes that this is such an important growth industry. Data centers provide the physical infrastructure. We absolutely are going to see this develop both from the large clouds such as your Amazons and Google and Meta and Microsoft and all these people. And then you're also going to see kind of these hybrid co-located type data centers where if a hospital is running, it will have a private data center that is being run by one of the other ones like Equinox, or they have a bunch of some of these other firms that do some of that work. So this is not, nowhere should we suggest, let's sit this out because we are seeing a lot of problems with environmental effects. That is not a solution. This is like, let us participate, but let us ensure that for our population, for our citizens of the state, that the guardrails are in place.
Guardrails, a big one right there.
Guardrails, yeah, and it really kind of comes full circle. At the beginning of that story, Amy Sharma, she said, look, I really just, and this is her speaking, she said she wants people to be paying attention to this. And you heard Professor Chalapa there talk about this thing as an industry is growing, it's evolving, it's moving quickly. Amy Sharma and many others would say they hope stories like this and just general knowledge, paying attention happens, because this is going to be something that it's already impacting us and it is going to continue to impact us as long as these are a big part of our lives. I don't think that is going anywhere.
And I'd argue it's better to be proactive than reactive when something goes wrong. And we're also dependent on this technology already. What happens if it goes out?
Got to pay attention to it.
Yeah. Zach, thank you so much for breaking that down. I learned so much from this. I hope you guys did too. And we want to remind our viewers that if you have a tip for Zach or any of our 11Alive News Investigates team members, you can reach out directly by calling 404-873-9111 or by emailing investigates@11alive.com. I want to thank you so much for joining Inside 11Alive News Investigates. We'll see you next time.